Back in the day, games had to work within their limitation. Nowadays, they just fill your hard drive with nonsense. Originally, this caused a lot of devs to focus more on their vision, gameplay, and game design, usually leaning into specialization. It's why a lot of people praise and appreciate games from back then. If a game was about something, there's a good chance it was going to be good at it. They didn't need to add in other features to try and rake in other customers who had no interest in the game, or gaming in general. They show you what the game was about and you already knew if you were on board. In 1999, a little game was released onto the PS1 called Driver, or as known in America, Driver, You Are the Wheelman. Ha! What a stupid subtitle. Sucks for you, Yanks. Well, actually, there may have been some foresight for this. Typing in Driver to Google doesn't exactly bring up the game. Driver was one of the first 3D open world games. Open world games already existed at the time, but they were usually 2D. Even the first Grand Theft Auto games were top down, because the technology and physical disk space just wasn't big enough yet. Driver managed to fit 4 different cities into a single disc. Yeah, it looks lame now, but back then this was a huge feat. The open world was also designed like how open world games should be, by complementing the gameplay. Today a lot of open world games are just a huge waste of space, crammed in by publishers who think open world is all you need to sell to the masses, or trying to put in stuff that will appeal to everyone, and you know that old saying, a game made for everyone is made for no one. Even though this game came out in 1999, there were some pretty advanced details in the game. There are objects scattered around that you can smash through, there are different weather effects, there's a day and night cycle, kinda, although it also depends on which version you're playing, as the PC version also has a rear view mirror, which was still impressive. Even modern games have trouble doing that, mostly because reflections can't exist in a video game and they have to code in tricks to get around it. Driver was focused on driving. Yeah, I know that sounds weird, what I mean is it's not a racing game. You don't race other drivers around checkpoints. It's focused mainly on the types of missions you would expect from a criminal driver. This game's inspiration came from crime thriller movies that also contained car chases. Most notably the 1978 crime thriller movie, The Driver, especially over one specific scene from the movie. You play Tanner, a cop who goes undercover as a crook that uses his talent as a street racer to get employment from criminals, mainly as a getaway car. Your first mission is to prove yourself to criminals, opening up the infamous car park level. Oh boy, you want to talk about gatekeeping? You want to talk about the molten core? You want to talk about Father Gascoigne? Check out Driver. This opening level is infamous for a reason. You're tossed into the deep end of the pool and are tasked with not drowning. Well, no, scratch that. You're tasked with not drowning and being a proficient swimmer. This opening level was lifted straight from the car park scene in The Driver. You're given a list of stunts to perform and 60 seconds to do them all. You haven't even figured out which button is the accelerator and you're already having an exam. Of course you're going to fail. You will also find out from trial and error that you get an X on your sheet whenever you crash or scratch the car. 4 X's and you fail. Failing by crashing or by the time limit will cause your reviewer to mock you. I miss when games used to mock us.
You think you can handle it, wet nose?
So before you even hit the main game, you want to check out the tutorial. I know, horrible suggestion. As everybody knows, gamers hate to learn and non-gamers don't. The tutorial levels open with a demonstration on how you're supposed to drive, leaving behind a ghost for you to follow. The desert tutorial levels actually have no real failure state. You can drive as stupid as you want, but you still have a time limit. If you take too long, the tutorial just ends. You think games today are tough? Back then, we were timed on tutorials. You also have the same car park level as the tutorial, except there's no parked cars around. Even so, you're still looking at the list wondering what you're supposed to do. Burnout? Okay, you may know what a burnout is, but how do you do that? Well, actually in Driver, there's a burnout button. Just press and hold that. Real useful for rotating on a spot when you want to quickly change direction from a full stop. Nowadays games just code burnout to handbrake or brake with the acceleration button. Slalom? Okay, as a 10-year-old boy you have to pause the game, get up, go to your mum, dad or older brother and ask them what a slalom is. Then you gotta figure out how the devs actually coded the slalom. Like, how far out or how close do you have to be for it to count? Then you find out you have to actually go both ways for it to count. But you also have to go fast to beat the time limit. But you also have to be careful that you don't hit your car. A full lap? How wide am I allowed to go? How close am I allowed to go? Is the lap code a line you have to start the lap from? Actually, they were a bit lenient on this, and it gets crossed off without even fully going around the parking lot. Speed? Well, what's the speed limit I have to reach? Does it get checked off once I reach it? Can I crash at the wall at full speed and still complete it? No, actually, you have to reach a high speed and slow down right before you hit the wall. 360? How the fuck do I do that? Oh, okay, you just turn or even use burnout. Wait, why wasn't the 180 also checked off? If I did a 360, then I did two 180s. Well, actually the 180 is from speeding and quickly turning 180. It's not a spin. Reverse 180? Okay, I'm gonna have to actually spend some time testing this one out. Trying to find the right method. Now, it may sound weird to be questioning the devs on how these moves are coded, but you kinda have to. I feel like this is something that only gamers do, or rather gamers who give a shit. The thing about doing anything in a video game is it all depends on the coding, not how you think it should work. I know that sounds stupid, but everything in a video game is ultimately limited by the coding. Understanding this actually ends up helping come to terms with gaming. Plenty of tests have gone into this, and they discovered that people always have a preference for what they think should happen over what actually did happen. This problem becomes exasperated with video games, especially when multiple people have different opinions on how something should work. That's why you get a lot of people angry when they miss shooting someone. They always blame the game. The game could have perfect coding and it will still be treated as broken if something in-game does something different from what somebody thinks, even if that person is totally wrong. Of course, that's just typical human behavior, but good gamers can at least look at the game from the developer's view and get a better understanding of how it works. Games like Driver help me understand that. Most gamers actually end up doing this, even if they're totally unaware that they are. Usually referred to as game feel, where they're feeling out the game by playing it, when really they're just feeling out the code. Although what sucks with modern gaming is that they're forced to code the feeling towards non-gamers by shaking the screen or making guns loud, or even just adding a snap whenever they accomplish something like hitting someone. Still, keeping in mind how the coding would work can really help with gaming problems or accepting losses. I know I fight at someone in a game and ended up losing, immediately blaming the game, only to calm down, evaluate and think about how the coding works to realize why I lost, rather than blame the devs. After feeling out the code, you start the game for real and manage to clear the first mission with ease. I guess that infamous car park got its reputation from all the people that quit. You then start the rest of the game and find a rather challenging experience waiting for you. Not all the time, but a lot of time limits are rather tight and you'll find yourself repeating levels. One thing I did discover coming back was just how much variety there was in the game. Pretty impressive for a game designed around just being the getaway driver. You also have car deliveries, chasing a boat, getting caught in a sting, chasing a tram, smashing up restaurants and beating up other cars. Actually, that last one is a bit annoying. You have to smash into other cars to make their damage go up, but smashing into them also causes you to take damage, which can cause you to act real hesitant towards doing it. You have to smash into them, but smashing will make you lose. Even with the challenge of the game, they also give you a few breaks. Like in the mission to smash the armored car, it'll actually pull over if you don't manage to damage it in time, which makes the next part of the mission harder as you're further away from the end goal. Some missions will have you tearing your hair out can be followed up by an easier mission. If you're running against the clock and are being chased by cops, they'll stop chasing you when you get near your goal, so that you don't have to circle the block trying to get rid of them. But if you're not up against the clock, then you'll need to lose them. When you check your messages to select a mission, you may actually get more than one. Sometimes it's a wrong number put in as a joke or a message about getting a new car, but most of the time it's different missions for you to take on. However, when you choose a mission, you miss out on the other missions. On the plus side, if you're having trouble beating a mission, you might have the option to try a different mission and proceed further into beating the game. On the negative side, you'll be missing out on content. You can make a few extra save files and reload to do them, but still. Some of the missions can be long, but some missions also have multiple parts. Kind of like checkpoints, although it's probably the only way to have cutscenes played within missions. Either way, they're nice except for one little thing. When you reach these checkpoints and begin the next part, any damage and felony you accumulated from the previous part remains. Of course, this makes sense since the next part is still part of the same mission, but knowing each part is hindsight. So you might finish a part with high damage or felony, only to find out you still got a mission to do and be in a bad state to complete it, which might even make you restart the mission altogether so that you can be in a better condition for the next part. Whether it's really long or has checkpoints, some missions will be easier if you don't get any attention from the cops when you reach the destination. Since players will most likely be driving as fast as they can, they'll be getting attention from the cops, making the mission harder. There's a way to avoid this, at least until the game forces the cops on you. All you have to do is think about the code and feeling out the game. There's the obvious, hitting a car right in front of them or hitting a cop car themselves. Small damage won't get you noticed, but if you've been damaged a lot, they'll try crashing into you for your own safety. Driving on the wrong side of the road or off the road on grassy areas will also get their attention. Although if you get hit by someone else, the cops will still blame you. Let's just let this one slide, no need to put that much pressure on the devs. You should also be paying attention to the rules of the road, because the cops will start chasing you if you run a red light. That's so cool. Do they even do that in Grand Theft Auto? I don't remember. They usually only chase you when you shoot someone. Actually, how many games have coded cops chasing you for running a red light? This came out in '99 on the PS1, so it's amazing that they managed to actually code that in. Not all the time. In this same mission, I ran a red light and got no attention. Then I ran a second red light and made them mad. Still, that's impressive. They even coded in your car using its blinker if you drive slowly when turning. Yeah, most people won't notice this. Here's another detail that's pretty freaking cool. You'll be driving around and get their attention, most likely pissing you off and thinking the code is broken. The reason why they're getting mad is because you're actually speeding. Yeah, they actually coded that into the game. It makes total sense, but since this is a video game, I doubt most people would even think of that. Was that even in Grand Theft Auto? I only remember them chasing me if I clipped someone while speeding. Staying under 60 won't draw their attention, and you also don't need to keep tapping the acceleration. The game actually has a cruise control button. It works like real cruise control, not like in those stories where people thought it was auto-driving AI, like back in the 90s. You hold it and remain around your current speed. You drop below 60 and hold cruise control, allowing you to just glide right by a cop without raising suspicion. At first I thought this was stupid, I most likely did as a kid, but this little detail actually started to grow on me. It comes off as really cheeky. I have to pick up some criminals robbing a bank and I want to get there with no attention. When a cop comes by, it really felt like I was sneaking by them, right under their nose. As for the time limit, it does actually add some pressure. I have to find the right time to slow down and speed up. The extra time it takes me to sneak by puts more emphasis on being a better driver when I need to make up the lost time. It's also a small self-reward for showing restraint, something gamers have trouble coping with, especially non-gamers who have never even heard of the word. I know this sounds weird, but this is the kind of experience only video games can give us. It's not totally perfect, there's some issues you need to come to grips with. When you're being chased, the cops will sometimes block the road. That's fine, except there's a weird quirk to the code where the cops blocking the road are inactive unless you or someone else hits them, at which point they wake up and start chasing you. So there's a bit more emphasis to avoid hitting them aside from taking damage or losing control. Their spawn rate and locations can get annoying. On one hand, the RNG of the cop patrols can make each mission attempt feel unique and different, causing you to take different paths to avoid them. On the other, the RNG can go against you and spawn several cops right outside the finish line. This also causes a problem where you're constantly looking at the mini-map for the cops. Fucking hell, it's like I'm playing Grand Theft Auto where I'm constantly looking at the GPS line. Yeah, originally we praised this quality of life upgrade to open world games, but now we spend most of our time staring at the corner of the game instead of the actual game world. I actually prefer Driver's method. It's a huge gradient triangle that shrinks as you get closer. It pushes you in the right direction, but doesn't tell you the optimal path. So you can just glance at it to know if you're going the right direction. Now we enter the end game. First things first, choosing which ending to get. Yeah, there's actually 2 different endings, although the difference isn't that much. It's the standard ending, then a second cutscene showing Tanner driving, or driving off with the girl. What determines this ending is pretty simple, but has no tell. When you reach New York, you're given 2 missions. The first leads to the normal ending, while the second leads to the good ending. That's it, that's how you get the endings. Also, the penultimate mission depends on which one you choose. As for the last mission, oh boy. Anybody who's played this mission knows what I'm talking about. The car park level is infamous for how difficult it is, but that's nothing compared to the final mission, the President's Run. First, the positives. I like how the story and gameplay match up. The crime boss is looking for a good driver. Tanner goes undercover to claim that spot. He's tested along the way, then his ultimate plan is revealed, where he's putting Tanner in the driver's seat for the President's car, where his expert driving will allow him to dodge the police and Secret Service until he's taken somewhere specific to be executed. The devs must know how difficult this last mission is, so they increase your health to compensate, although it doesn't help much. This mission is brutal. If the car park was inspired by the driver, then this final mission was inspired by It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Cause holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit, I'm not supposed to go this high. I actually think they made a tiny nerf in the American and PC version. Originally there were cops and black cars chasing you down. I always thought they were gangsters, while other people think they're the Secret Service or FBI. Either way, they were replaced with cops, most likely to make it easier to notice them from a distance. Today they will just cover them in yellow paint. The game was relatively challenging and balanced up until this moment, but most of the time it really feels like you have no chance. It's also snowing, so you don't fully have control. Although it's not that bad, it just feels like you're constantly driving on grass. It also doesn't stop the cops hunting you down and smashing the president's car. Ooh, let's insert a cheap political joke. Wow, those cops really hate the president. They must be blank voters. Then just put in any political party, the joke is the same. Is there any advice someone could give? Yeah, good luck. Well, actually I do have some. Everybody's plan will most likely be the same. Drive as fast as you can to end the mission quicker. Instead, you should take the fight to them. Well, not literally. This is why video games are awesome. How different you can approach problems. Although a lot of gamers like it to be simple, either go all in or don't bother. So to them, fighting the police means smashing into them until they all die. You just don't have the health for that though. What you want to do is actually cause them to lightly damage themselves. Drive close by to other cars, trees, light posts, or buildings. They won't crash and die, but they'll take some damage. They'll merely catch up to you, but if they've taken enough damage, they'll crash into you and die. If there's enough room, try and turn around corners instead of going straight at high speed. This will use their speed against them and cause them to smash around the corner. The last third has this long stretch of grassy areas. This is the best way to keep the cops off your tail, as there's plenty of trees and light poles you can slalom through. Hey, that skill became useful. You can't really notice it, but all the chipping damage is doing good. If they take too much damage and die, this will cause the other cops to crash into them and take further damage, which helps keep all cop cars off your ass as you reach the end. So focus less on speed and more on zigzagging. Today they will put a gaudy health bar above the vehicles and make the game click when they take damage. So go to a pet shop, buy a clicker and just click it every time you hear something. Reaching the end is still tense because a group of cops can suddenly appear. If you have the health, you can probably tank them. If not, try and use the corner to bait them and slam into the ending. Even so, this mission is still brutal. I beat the game on hard, but nobody will blame you for lowering the difficulty down to normal or even easy just to beat this one level. But when you do, oh man, you get a huge serotonin burst in your brain for beating such a challenging game, which can only be done after learning how to play the game. That's what gaming is about. Now to talk about the worst aspect of the game. It's fairly simple. Where do you go from here? What Driver does, it does very well, but it's also limited in scope. Making a sequel from this will be rather difficult. There are usually 3 directions that are picked from. They can focus on their strengths and improve on what they have, at the risk of a sequel that doesn't really evolve. I think that's the gamer's choice. They can rip off another franchise that's successful, at the risk that it could distract from the original game. This is the publisher's choice. Or they can do something wildly different that may or may not benefit the original game. This is the tourist's choice. Driver 2 came out on the PS1 a year later. It's kind of a mixed opinion. Some people like it, some people hate it. My opinion is also kind of mixed. I was introduced to the game back in the day by my younger brother. I had this friend across the road where, after an unfortunate wrestling accident, stopped being friends with me and started being friends with my younger brother. One weekend they came up to me with a copy of Driver 2 and asked me to beat the game for them. I forget why, most likely so that I could have unlocked all content in the game for them to play, or maybe having a beaten game on their memory card made them think it counted as them beating it. Claiming they beat the game when someone else did. They could have had a successful career as game journalists. I think I actually did beat the game that weekend, or over the next week anyways. First obvious improvement was the FMVs. Driver 1's FMVs were really bad. Although they did try to hide the quality by using shadows as part of its style. Driver 2 FMVs are much better, although obviously they did get dated pretty quickly. In-game, the overall style and design of all cars and backgrounds are better, maps are laid out much better, and the streets have more junk for you to crash through. Roads have more elevation and even have rising bridges for you to jump over. You know, one of our old boyhood dreams. The sequel also gave us a massive innovation only thought possible within our dreams. A revolution so great that even the first mission begins showing you their ambition. You can walk! Yeah, okay, it's nothing compared to today. But come on, the idea that you can get out of your car and into another one was thought to be impossible. Yeah, GTA did it before, but this was the start of the true 3D era. This actually did excite people, although its main use is a good excuse to switch cars to reset your damage and felony meters. There's no tutorial levels and no car park level. You start the game and they throw you right in. You start driving and yeah, this is where my main issue of the game begins. The driving physics is a bit off from the previous game. It's fine, it just takes more getting used to than it does in Driver 1. You basically have to relearn everything. I do hate how they took out auto handbrake. It was optional in Driver 1, but leaving it on gave me so much more control. It also functioned like a soft handbrake. When you're turning, the soft handbrake makes it easier, and you still have the handbrake button that was much stronger. By removing the soft auto handbrake, I have less control over vehicles. A lot of the time I end up fishtailing someone just trying to line up. The handbrake you have is so strong that I only have to tap it to make turns. Holding it basically makes you spin out. The hitbox and reaction to hitting objects or buildings is also much stronger. Before it was mostly relative to speed, you know, high speed, high crashes. But in Driver 2 it takes very little for you to crash or spin out of control. A lot of the time it doesn't even feel like it's your fault. Look here, I need to pass these cars by scraping along the wall. I expect minimal amount of damage at worst. Then as I'm trying to scrape by, I suddenly spin out from the poor hit detection. This really puts emphasis on dodging obstacles and vehicles, but mostly because any hits will cause you to spin out so much that one mistake will fail the mission. The mission structure was improved, and also not. Okay, there's a variety of missions that are fun to play with some missions that can only exist in Driver. Like, you have to chase this guy down into the wharfs, only to find out it's an ambush and have to escape. As you're driving through warehouses, vans will block your escape, while trucks and the raised bridge will cause you to look for an exit, ending with a bridge jump. You may need some extra time to find the right path though, so you can just smash your way through. More variety than in Driver 1, where you'll be smashing cars with a bus, or chasing a truck that's throwing bombs at you, or jumping off a pier to land on a barge. Early on, you start a mission where you have to tail someone. Okay, I think tailing missions can work if a designer and a good coder works hard at it, but most of the time tailing missions suck and have the same problems. It's basically coded as a ring you have to stay inside, even if stopping a certain distance behind your target would logically stand out. Problem usually comes at corners. Your target stops at an intersection, causing you to stop further back. They then turn the corner and one of two things will happen. They will suddenly floor it and travel normally, but because you still have to drive to the corner, you run the risk of leaving the ring and failing, causing you to rush and drift around the corner. Or, your target will stop at the next intersection or behind a line of cars you can't see while you come full speed around the corner, making you get too close and failing the mission. It also sucks that you can fail from losing a target even if they're in the only location that they could be in. Still, the variety is nice, although there may be too much variety. What I mean is that they gave you the ability to walk and created scenarios where you have to walk, even if by design it would be better if they just omitted it. A lot of missions have you standing next to the car you have to get into. Why not just start me in the car? Which in some missions is also a bad idea. Like how in this mission you're told you need to get somewhere fast. You jump into your car and smash into the garage door. You have to actually open the garage door and then get into your car. Speaking of, this part of the game really annoyed me. There are several missions in Havana that repeat this nonsense. You have to damage this truck to make the driver run, that's fine. You then jump into the truck and have to deliver it to a lockup while avoiding the truck getting more wrecked, also fine. When you get to the lockup, you have to stop, get out, open the garage door, get back in, drive in, get out, and close the garage door. Do I have to do each of these little steps that have no challenge or meaning? It's this kind of nonsense that made me stop playing Rockstar games and avoid even buying or playing Red Dead Redemption 2. Even Nakey Jakey, who liked RDR2, heavily criticized the game for being designed like this. If someone who likes RDR2 didn't like this limitation, then I made the right call as someone who hates this limitation. Even outside these missions with all these scripts, a lot of missions are rather limited, especially in the second half. The time limit for most missions are so tight. You have to bust your ass finding the shortest path. Time limits in Driver 1 could also be tight, but there was plenty of room for error or different paths. You could look at the map and plan your route, or try different routes. Or circumstance would make you suddenly take a different route you're planning from. In Driver 2, you pretty much have to figure out which route is the intended route. Deviating from these routes only makes you realize you took the wrong one, even if the one you're on seems the most logical. Made even more annoying by the fact that some missions have no logical reasons for having a time limit. You just fail if you don't reach the zone or complete the mission. Like in one mission, you have to steal an ambulance by damaging it. If you take too long, the ambulance will pull over and you'll fail. There's a similar mission in Driver 1 to take out an armored car. The van ends up crashing at a specific location if you don't manage to damage it in time, but the second half of the mission begins from there. Damaging the car early just shortens the distance you have to cover. Here's some examples. This is done over 2 missions. You get a job to pick up something important. Tanner has an idea of how to get it, but the player has none. You then have to steal a cop car. Next mission, you drive around the corner to stop a limo. Then you have to drive the limo to a mansion to trick the delivery man into giving you that important something. You're caught immediately and have to drive back to the lockup within a time limit. There's no reason for the time limit to steal a cop car or drive it to the lockup. The idea of pulling over a limo as a cop sounds cool, but it's not really necessary. Taking over the limo is no different than any other car. Just pull up and take it. Driving the limo to the mansion would actually have a time limit, because that would be how long it would take for the limo driver to find a phone and call ahead. But the time limit starts when the mission does. This could have worked out so much better. No time limit for stealing the cop car. A time limit for catching the limo, but you don't know where the limo is. You have to find it before it gets too close to the mansion. When you find it, the time limit resets when you take it. This also gives the player the option to wait until it's closer to the mansion, so you have more time to get there. A confident player could find it early and race there with the longer distance, if that's their decision. Then again, this game was on the PS1, so maybe my method and idea couldn't have been coded like that. There's this mission later on where you have to save Jones. The time limit is so tight. It makes sense, but there's no room for error here. You end up doing this annoying thing in video games when you have a challenge that is so limited by errors. If you've played enough games, you know what I'm talking about, the stop and restart approach. You'll be playing a mission, make one mistake, no matter how small, and you just know. There's no point in continuing the mission, and it's best just to pause and restart. I never really got this feeling in Driver 1. Even when I made a mistake or the RNG of the cops went against me, I never felt the mission was over for the most part. I always felt like I could recover and complete the mission. Driver 2 has a lot of trial and error. It doesn't help that they tried to make the game faster by putting you right into the action with barely any warning. In Driver 1, you hear the details in the recordings, you get a cutscene that confirms it, you then start the mission having to drive the location and then complete the mission, which is enough time to understand the mission and figure out the layout. In Driver 2, you get a in-game cutscene giving a vague idea of what you're about to do, then tossed right in. Many times you're just sitting there like, wait, what? Trying to figure out what to do only through trial and error. You have to beat this train and save a guy locked in a car on the tracks. Then find out you gotta lean left to pass this opening. Then find out you gotta turn right after this opening to avoid a building. You don't have enough time to get out, so you might try ramming the car off the tracks. Then the game fails you for damaging the car. So you get out and into the car, then the train smashes into you and you somehow survive? Oh, and make sure you drive to the arrow before time runs out for no reason. It doesn't matter how much you learn the path, you'll sometimes do everything perfect and then find out you actually needed an extra 10 seconds so that you can get out of your car and walk to the arrow. It's so tight I start driving poorly by smashing into walls to help me swing around corners at full speed. Like when Ross Chastain used the wall to qualify. A lot of the time it really feels like it's not your fault for failing, that sometimes the game can screw you over, or that sometimes you complete a mission by accident. In this mission you have to chase a gunman. Apparently this is a really hard mission, but I got lucky and managed to swing into him and cause enough damage to end the mission early. I may know why some of these changes happened. There's a problem in video games that's rarely talked about. Which makes sense, there's no real term to explain it, and it rarely happens. There may be a term for it, but I haven't heard of it. So I'm just going to call it critical overcorrection. Critical overcorrection, what is that? When a video game releases, reviewers and players end up finding problems. Typically about the gameplay or game design, or at least they should. Problems that the dev may know about but had no time to fix, or problems that they didn't foresee. Any following games fix or improve these issues, that's normal, it's expected. However, sometimes the feedback can be really loud or too numerous, or become a meme, etc. Causing a small panic where the devs, or maybe even the publisher, become terrified of hearing those complaints ever again. They focus on fixing the issue, but they end up going too far, which ends up causing different problems for the next game, or sometimes end up hurting the initial idea and soul of the previous game. For example, in Far Cry 2 there were several checkpoints in the game, full of enemies that immediately start shooting you. You spend time and resources killing them all, then walk away from the base to pick up an item or something, only to come back and find all the enemies have respawned. Eventually, you just start speeding through these zones, but they get into a car and start chasing you. In Far Cry 3 and onwards, they became scared of this criticism, so they made enemies much less aggressive, and killing everybody at a base will eliminate enemies from that area permanently. which sounds good, but then the game starts to feel really empty as you take over more bases, making the opposition feel much smaller than the story portrays them as. Battletoads on Nintendo was brutal, but Battletoads on Super Nintendo was a brisk walk by comparison. Halo Reach armor abilities caused a few people to scream really loud, so in Halo 4 they made armor abilities completely useless. Dragon Age 2 was criticized for reusing the same maps over and over again. In Dragon Age 3 they gave us the hinterlands. People really love Demon Souls and Dark Souls, but they can endlessly complain to you about future games by any developer making wrong choices in the sequels. Kingdom Hearts was criticized for being clunky, so Kingdom Hearts 2 is really floaty and simple. Sometimes it's not sequels, can even happen with remakes and remasters. Odin Sphere has a classic and refined version. Fans of the original classic version might be put off with the changes the refined version did, and myself included. Classic had a lot of nuance that emphasized resource management. The refined version lost a lot of this nuance when they made the combat very loose, with a lot of combos and air juggling. It's why Odin Sphere now has two types of fans. Driver 2 seems to have been affected by this. People complained about the car park level, so the game throws you right into the game. Obeying the law around cops slowed the game down, so now cops are mostly absent. Missions took too long to start, so now you're dropped right into the action with little context. The final mission was too hard, so now it's a simple tailing mission. Of course, this is all conjecture. Everything I say can be total bullshit, but devs have admitted in the past they designed games for the dumbest players. As for the final mission, it's got nothing on the President's Run. At first it sounds cool, chasing a helicopter, because they're not limited by the roads, and following one can be really difficult if you have to predict which roads would be needed to chase one. It follows a set path at the same pace. There are no physics, it's all scripted. You have to stay real close, but staying close is also bad, because it's flying above your sight so you can miss it turning and end up falling behind. Especially when it reaches this long stretch of road where it will quickly reach top speed. With gangsters flying right towards you, it's another trial and error mission where one mistake means restarting. But hey, let's think about how the coding works and take advantage of it. The mission statement says to keep it in sight, but really, the goal is to stay within the circle. This means you don't actually have to stay on the same street, so long as you're within the circle. Rather than zigzagging through the city, let's instead get extra speed and distance by taking a wider route. Look at that, now we're ahead of the chopper. We can make an error or two and still be able to. What the fuck do you mean I failed? How? I'm in front of the chopper. This game is so fucking broken. No, let's think about this for a second. Think of the coding. I focused on abusing the ring. I drove ahead to try and get extra time. Oh, okay. I drove too far forward that I actually left the ring. This isn't the game's fault, this is on me. So I restart again, drive forward, but stay within the ring until I get to the end. Game done. Yeah, a real letdown. When you beat the President's Run, it really feels like you accomplished something. Like you really beat the game. Driver 2, it's like any mission of the game. I wouldn't be surprised if there were people who were surprised it was the last mission when they saw the credits. The difficulty is basically the same throughout the whole game. And you probably don't want to make the game harder with the difficulty settings, which change how aggressive enemy cars are. The settings in Driver 1 were designed like you think, a nice gradient. But the difference between normal and hard in Driver 2 is night and day. Here's normal in this mission when an enemy car begins right behind you. He drives like you think he would, not too hard but tries to knock you around. Now here's the same mission on hard. Yeah, the difficulty setting isn't easy, normal, hard, it's easy, normal, and the President's Run from Driver 1. I beat the whole game on hard, but I wouldn't blame you for playing on normal. So I was kinda mean to Driver 2, which sucks because there are some stuff I like in it. I could have forgiven a lot of it, but my main problem was the control and physics change. I just liked how much more control I had in Driver 1. Failing mostly felt like it was my fault, while in Driver 2, failing felt like it was the game's fault. I think some people actually prefer that. Some people, if they fail, can't handle it, because they're too skilled to fail. But if the game fails, it protects their ego. It's not their fault, especially when the mission structure is rather limited. They just have to find the right answer rather than coming up with the answer at the time. It's probably why these kinds of players actually prefer the mission structure of modern GTA games. It tells them exactly what to do. A gamer would prefer being told to throw the gas grenade into the ventilation and then figure out where to go, while other players would prefer just being given an arrow and step-by-step instructions. Decreases the chance of failure. Now, you may be thinking that what I'm saying is rather mean. You see, the thing is, that's what I was going for, thanks for noticing. But hopefully this can explain why people prefer Driver 1 to Driver 2. Why people prefer Odyssey Classic or Refined. Or why people prefer Halo 1 or Halo 2. This can also explain why some people had trouble with the car park mission. Gamers were able to fill out the game and complete it, while others just wanted step-by-step instructions. Occasionally, someone will post online asking for help on beating the interview. I promise you, you can beat this car park level if you just engage with the game. Don't ask for the answer, believe in yourself. Unless you're a non-gamer, then piss off. But look, I get it. You're still overcoming the challenge of the missions, even it is rather limited. I would like to throw these kind of players into something like System Shock though. That would be fucking funny. The mixed reaction probably turned them off from continuing with the focus on driving only. Also, the higher ups were probably asking for more profit. So for the next game, they went with the second idea of stealing ideas from other franchises. Taking shooting elements from GTA and cramming them into a driving game. Now, taking something from another game isn't automatically a bad thing. It really depends on whether it adds something to the original idea, and if it's implemented well. Does it add anything to Driver 3? I don't know, I never played it. Yeah, I wasn't on board with the GTA element being added in. Looking at playthroughs online, it seems like there was too much emphasis on shooting, and the driving elements were mostly just used for getting around. Well, that sucks. Hey, since GTA is the most popular and successful video game franchise in history, maybe you shouldn't be mocking it so much. No. There was also some rumors going around that Ubisoft were buying positive reviews for the game. Controversy for the industry till this day. Plus, look at the name. They put the 3 in place of the E, causing people to mock the game by calling it Drive 3er. Why do they still do this? Replace letters in the title with the number. Did that ever work? Does anybody actually like that? Well, aside from publishers trying to use it as free advertisement. Besides, if I wanted to play a cheap GTA clone with no depth, I go play GTA. Bam! There was also Driver Parallel Lines, which I also didn't pay attention to. Maybe I was growing up and just getting over the Driver franchise. So playing it safe didn't work, stealing ideas didn't work. Next up is doing something different, which could either rejuvenate the franchise or be the final nail in the coffin, which is very easy to do since a new idea can immediately alienate original fans. Enter Driver San Francisco, which was such a breath of fresh air to the series. Not just the series, but to gaming in general. An idea that can only exist in game form. Although I didn't actually play this game at release, about 6 months later. I heard a lot of positive reviews for the game, even Yasi Croshaw loved it. And one day while walking through EB Games, I spotted the collector's edition at half off. At the start of the game, Tanner gets into an accident while chasing Jericho, who's from the second and third game, although he doesn't really look the same. Waking up, Tanner discovers he has the ability to shift out of his car and take control of people in other vehicles. Doing so can have Tanner appear in the middle of a conversation, which he immediately takes advantage of and leading to some funny dialogue. Listening to all this is way more interesting than listening to NPCs waxing philosophy that they clearly should have no education or experience in knowing about. Plus, characters in the car usually only talk in response to what's happening in-game. They're not constantly shouting nothing at you. NPCs will react to you speeding, jumping, crashing, or driving on the sidewalk.
What? You don't know the difference between the road and the sidewalk?
I know, I just don't care.
When characters do talk over the gameplay, it's usually related to the story. The game objectives are always clear, so NPCs won't constantly be telling you what to do. I remember seeing a clip of Horizon where Aloy is climbing on a robot while someone else is constantly shouting nothing at her on comms.
Pete's being the bait. Ha! Dodged it!
Stay still so I can swat you.
You're climbing on the robot! Whoa! Attack its weak point for massive damage. I'm glad I'm not down there. Get up on the Hydra's back. Get up on the Hydra's back. Get up on the Hydra's back. Speaking of NPCs talking down to you while your eyes are glued to the map, I really love the placement of the minimap in this game. It's high up in the center. Usually open world games put this down in the corner. Because it's up there, it's much easier to check where you're going while keeping your eyes on the road, rather than in the corner where you're busy looking at it so much that you might crash into someone. This might actually be useful in real life. It's probably safer to put your phone up and hanging from your sun guard rather than down by your gear stick. Plus, there's no GPS drawing a yellow line to your destination, and in races where you need to follow a set path, they use giant arrows on the road to block off wrong directions. You know what, fuck it. If open world games in the future don't place the minimap in the top center, I'm taking a point off it. Driving and shifting with ramming and boosting to complement the gameplay. The whole game is designed around this concept and it works beautifully. The story is also designed around this concept, but there's something even better. The writers decided not to treat you like an idiot. There's a plot twist near the end of the game that changes everything. Learning about this plot twist is totally a spoiler. But here's the thing about this plot twist. It is so fucking obvious what the twist is. The writers knew how obvious the plot twist is, so they didn't even try to hide it. They make it fairly obvious throughout the whole game and even lean into it. It turns out that Tanner's ghost possessions aren't real. It's all a dream. Tanner's actually in a coma while Jericho is running amok. Before anybody claims spoilers, immediately after Tanner gets hit by Jericho's truck and wakes up in his coma, he looks to his left and sees a sign telling him to wake up. Right after that, when you shift for the first time, you actually shift into the driver that's driving the ambulance Tanner is currently in. Soon after, they just straight up show Tanner lying in bed at a hospital. You may be asking, if the whole story is just a dream, why bother even watching it? There actually is a reason for this, aside from the excuse of shifting. While in hospital, the TV is left on, allowing Tanner to hear the news of all the stuff Jericho is doing. This is the reason why you play those missions within Tanner's coma. When he gets out of his coma, he connects all the crimes Jericho has been doing and manages to deduce his actual plan and stops him. Telling you Tanner is in a coma isn't a spoiler for the story. It is the story. I was actually going to talk about some of the missions you do, like the mission where you have to control two cars at the same time. Trust me, it works. But those would actually be spoilers, so I omitted them. One of the biggest praises I had for Driver 1 and 2 is the variety. While they've got nothing on Driver San Francisco, it's amazing how many new ideas they came up for this. You'll play each type once or twice during the main story missions, but they also have optional challenges and missions for anybody who liked those missions to keep playing, or for anybody who hated specific missions to avoid. Those are mostly just for the challenge and completionists. You get points which can be spent on upgrading your abilities, although there's only a few, but also new garages and new cars you can drive anytime you want. Actually, I'll give some advice here. I'd avoid doing some of the side content until you at least unlock Shift level 3, mainly because scrolling through the city at level 2 to select challenges really takes its time. I'd also advise you focus on getting the points multiplayer upgrades first, especially if you're going for 100%. Everything eventually becomes so expensive that you pretty much need these multipliers to buy everything. The game isn't perfect, I still have some complaints. The controls could be better. Default controls places boost to up on the thumbstick, which is kinda hard to boost while turning. Switch to right bumper or R1 for boost to make it easier. Also, ram and boost only seem to work when all wheels are on the ground, so you might press them only to get no response. I would even say there's too much variety. Rather, too many challenges to complete, although that's mostly annoying for completionists. It is all optional, so you don't have to do them all. Most of them are actually completed fairly quickly, but altogether they do up a lot of time. It's made the most obvious with the protection missions. You only do it once in the story. You're driving an armored van that's damaged to a tow truck, use the tow truck to drive the van, then for a set time you have to shift around and ram enemy cars coming in, trying to destroy the van. Now, I actually like this mission at first. Future protection missions are longer, with more enemies and jeeps that require an extra hit. The problem comes with the slow motion triggering during a crash. It's awesome, don't get me wrong, but regular missions only have a few crashes. Armored van missions though, they can have 50. When shifting, the game already slows down, this is fine, but slow motion crashes also adds up a lot of time. Here, look, in this mission, I have to protect the van for 3 minutes. Watching the counter from when it starts until it finishes, and not counting the time it takes me to finish the remaining enemies, it takes me 5 minutes and 33 seconds to protect this van for 3 minutes. That's an extra 2.5 minutes of slow motion. I get that it looks cool, but there's no way to skip them and there's no option to turn them off. You have to watch them all. When I came across the last armored van protection mission, I actually groaned, because I didn't really want to spend 6 minutes doing a 3-minute mission. Although there's a lot of extra missions to complete, most of them aren't brutally difficult. They're challenging, but I completed most of them on my first attempt. Main reason why is because you can always recover from a setback. Plus, the fail condition has some room for error. Missions like tailing or chasing have a ring you have to stay within. Previously, leaving the ring was instant failure, but now when you do, you get a 10-second countdown to get back to the ring, which can be challenging as the driver will be driving away from you. Because of the natural RNG of traffic, you can get screwed over, but it is nice that you can still recover. Like here, where I'm racing a pair of Asian boys trying to go to college. I'm in first place and halfway through the race. When I launch over this hill, I smash directly into a truck, bringing me to a complete stop and falling to last place. Any other game I would just restart, but I instead push on through and manage to swipe first place. In this mission I have to tell someone to listen in on his phone call. Falling behind gives me the 10-second countdown, while driving too close causes his suspicion meter to go up. Then a group of cars come by to try and ram him and I have to take them out, which then leads on to the next tailing part of the mission. Everything's going fine until he turns this corner and smashes right into this car. I'm going at high speed to keep up and end up almost crashing right into him. I immediately back off out of range before the suspicion meter fills up and was able to finish the mission. If the game caused me to fail immediately, I would be angry at the RNG of the game and even be blaming the game for causing me to fail. But since there's room for error and I was fast enough to respond, I instead get a funny story to tell that could only happen due to the RNG. In this race, you drive 2 cars and have to get first and second place with them. I drive 1 car ahead and get some distance, but then I notice my second car is really behind. If I switch to them and try to catch up, this will allow my opponents to gain some distance and cause my first car to fall behind. So instead, I shift to other cars and plow right into them to slow them down, which allowed my second car to finally catch up and win the race. A lot of dares or challenges can be completed anywhere or have options to try something different. Can't complete a jump at the location where you start? Go somewhere else where you know you can make the jump. This challenge tasks you with stopping races before they finish reaching the checkpoints. They're on the highway and there's a divider from oncoming traffic. I can pick a car on their side, but then I will need to shift further down the road so that I have enough time to turn around and ram the racers. But what if I instead use critical thinking? You know, that thing gamers hate. Actually, all humans hate. I shift into a bus, turn sideways. Ah yeah! Just like Driver 1, they put so much focus on making this gameplay work, and it's all the better for it. They even decided to reward Driver 1 players with a hidden Easter egg. Complete this challenge to unlock the DeLorean, then buy the DeLorean and drive it. Speed up until you reach 88 miles per hour. Get the reference? Doing so will unlock a new challenge mission in the menu, which is a recreation of the car park level. Just like in the original, you have to spend some time filling out the code. This is a different engine in a different game, so you still gotta learn how to do it all. It takes some time, but eventually you get used to it, although it can be a bit annoying. The original was a bit lenient, but this game takes a second to cross some off the list. Like how reverse 180 needs an extra second, so don't pause and restart if you think you failed. A lap? I don't know, I've tried different methods and it's inconsistent. Still, I fill it out and I managed to beat the challenge. 50 seconds, pretty good. There's also leaderboards, would be fun to check them out to see. Ah fuck, my console froze. I load back in then quit the challenge to try and get the achievement. Oh, it didn't unlock. That sucks. My console froze before giving it. The way it's coded is that you have to beat the challenge and then exit out. Oh well, I just did it again. 55 seconds. Not as good as my previous attempt, but it clears the challenge, so I back out and wait for the achievement. Where's the bleep bloop? Where's the bleep bloop? Oh no. Oh fuck, what the hell is going on? Why am I not getting the achievement? I scroll the leaderboards and I see it. My name listed at 50 seconds. Oh no. Oh shit. Did I just screw myself out of an achievement? Oh fuck this game. It doesn't work. The devs are such lazy shits. No. No. Take a step back. Driver taught me better than this. Just think about the code. Think this through logically. Okay. Sometimes devs have weird workarounds when coding their game. Sometimes they have to, sometimes they're limited, sometimes it's faster, whatever. Maybe they did something weird when coding in challenges. Maybe completion isn't coded by beating a high score. Maybe it's beating your own high score. And the default score is your high score. I know that sounds weird, but devs do stuff like this. Like in Conker's Bad Fur Day. One of the final areas is locked until you naturally progress up to it. Yeah, that's normal. However, the way they coded the final area unlocking is by attaching it to cutscenes. The game checks to see if you've seen all cutscenes up until that point, and if one of them isn't checked, it won't open. What this means is that if you do something that causes a cutscene to not trigger, Adam, you can't beat the game. You have to watch the cutscene, you can't bypass them. Maybe in Driver San Francisco they coded completion for beating your own high score, and then set your high score to a specific number for that challenge. This is all conjecture, I could be talking out my ass, but my only other options is to wait for a patch, which is never happening, or completely deleting all my data. I check the leaderboards. I want to see how much room I have to beat myself. I scroll through the first 1000 entries that all have a time of minus 300 trillion. I scroll through the next 1000 entries that all have a time of 0 seconds, or hacks. Then I find what I hope are the legit world record times, which are about 30 seconds. Okay, that's a difference of 20 seconds. All I need is a millisecond to beat my score. I buckled up and start the challenge all over again. This is brutal. I'm trying to find shortcuts everywhere. Trying to find the exact frame burnout is checked so I can peel out and gain a second. High speed slaloming. Trying to combine tasks from the checklist to save a second, like combining lap, speed and brake. I do everything right but miss out on a check for trying to end a task at the right moment for an extra second, but fail it for doing it a frame too early. I keep restarting and experimenting, starting to think I can't do this. And then, I enter a state of enlightenment. I enter the speedrunner state. Everything worked perfectly. Burnout at the right second, combining different tasks, going at high speed and managing to avoid hitting my car. The list completed, my time comes up, 46 seconds. I immediately exit out of the challenge and then... Phew, thank the coder. It's probably not how it's coded, but there has to be some truth to it. You see, you can unlock certain challenges by buying garages or collecting movie tokens. They're different from the usual devs because these are leaderboards only. You check them off for just doing them. But if you start a new game and unlock those same challenges, they can only reward you for beating the high score that was achieved on your profile. If you can't beat your own high score, they aren't checked off and remain highlighted. This can be annoying for completionists wanting to restart the game, as even if they can beat their own high score, they'll eventually reach a point where their high score can't be beaten by them, or reaching a high score that is the physical max that could ever be achieved. I know it really doesn't matter, but it is still something future devs need to keep in mind. Just give a standard score to reach and add leaderboards on top of that. Regardless, I appreciate going back to these games, even Driver 2. I don't like it, but I appreciate the mission variety. Driver San Francisco was a good palate cleanser back in 2012, and it was still a nice palate cleanser 12 years later. What comes after Driver San Francisco? Nothing. Yep, this was the last Driver game since 2011. No hint of a new Driver game since. Even Driver San Francisco might be hard to come by since the game was delisted in 2016. I don't even need to look up the reason why. I already know it's license expiration. They used licensed cars and licensed music, so that's double delisted. Although, it is surprising that nothing came out of Driver San Francisco. It was a surprise hit. It was reviewed well, and even Ubisoft said it sold much higher than they anticipated. Usually when something like this happens, the publisher whips the dev team to churn out a sequel immediately. Why didn't Ubisoft start forcing out yearly sequels? Again, Driver is rather limited, in more ways than one. They can't do to the franchise what they can do to others. It's focused on cars, so they can't hire a celebrity to try and sell more copies. There's less opportunities for crossovers with overpriced skins, and they can't force in a battle royale mode, or even a live service everybody hates. Maybe it's for the best. Which sucks because there's two ways I can think of to continue the franchise. First is to treat it like an indie development game. A new game, or a remake of the original, which they can easily fuck up, that has a smaller budget and a smaller team, sold at less than full price. Can also be an excuse to give the game to junior devs in the company to cut their teeth on, before they crush their spirits by throwing them into the live service mines. Another way is to leap off San Francisco and make something truly unique. I've got an idea. Let's build the design document for it. Codename Project Ghost Driver. First off, this game will be a reboot of Driver. I know people can hate reboots, but it's been too long since the last Driver game, and a positive with a reboot is if it sucks, it's much easier to separate it from the franchise. Or make a spiritual sequel, whatever. Game begins with Tanner in his 1970 Dodge Challenger R/T that he calls Daisy, and Jones chasing someone. It could be a new guy, Jericho, or even Slater from Driver 1 for the old fans. Hey wait, since Tanner is a cop, we should change his profession due to the current trend of everyone online hating— Shut up! Bad guy is in a car chase after stealing something and there's a nasty crash that kills him. But the MacGuffin he stole is like a voodoo artifact or tiki mask or whatever, totally cursed, that brings cars to life that he controls. But the crash also cursed Tanner's Dodge and brings that to life, which will be the excuse for giving us ghost powers for the gameplay. Then we add in stuff you would expect, like slow motion, car ramming, incorporeal, which would make flying through cars on the highway easier, and even car possession as an excuse to bring back shifting. These abilities can be triggered cooldowns, or we can have a meter that drains each time you use an ability. It refills slowly, but refills faster when doing stunts like ramming cars or launching off ramps, which also allows the player to combine abilities, like using speed boost to catch up to someone, slow motion, then spin sideways to line yourself up with the enemy, then using a ramming attack to T-bone the enemy that was in front of you. Wait, ghost powers? Possession? We won't be able to sell that game to China. We won't be able to sell the game to China. Shut up! Actually, this does give us an excuse to sideline some morale problems. Pedestrians in Driver always manage to jump out of the way and never get hit. In Ghost Driver, we can just say that Daisy phases through the pedestrians, no harm. When hitting a car, we can just say Daisy automatically protects civilians with ghost magic. We can even say that when you drive away, ghost magic repairs their car, which might avoid licensing issues. When car companies license out their vehicles, they usually don't like them suffering from car damage, because that would lower sales somehow. Although San Francisco always had good damage effects, maybe it costs extra to be allowed to do that, so that's triple delisted. This premise also allows us to bring in something unique and fun: excuses for boss battles with cars. You can have an ice cream van that spreads out a mist to obscure vision and spray ice on the road to slip you up, or a cement truck that sprays cement on the road to slow you down. Its barrel can also stop spinning as a tell for when it's about to shoot a hard rock of cement at you. Yeah, I know cement doesn't dry that fast, work with me here. Then have a boss fight against a car carrier truck that shoots out cars directly at you. Then bring in an excavator that tries to nab you with its claw, and when it passes by another car, it grabs the car and throws it at you. That sounds like a lot of fun. Here's something to add just for fun: shit talking. Having oppositions shit talk each other is rare because there's no real logical way to do it. Some games manage to though, like the Star Fox franchise, even though it's rather PG about it. But also Titanfall.
You hear that ringing in your ears, son? Dodge this.
It's fun and adds some personality to the characters. You can easily do the same with car radios and ghost magic, having Tanner and the villains communicating and shit-talking each other over the radio. No, it doesn't make sense, but it's for fun. Petrol has never been an issue in any driving game, and it won't be here either. We have the excuse of ghost magic, but we can still have fun with it by using the petrol meter in cars as the indicator of your vehicle's health, rather than a lame and simple bar. The petrol icon blinks when you're low on health and stays on when you're really low. Why would you bother using an artistic icon to measure health over a standard blank bar that's easier to... Because it's fun! Ubisoft will be banging on about representation, which is funny because Driver always did that. Further proof that gamers aren't sexist or racist. Driver 1 was set in the 70s, as it was inspired by the 1970 movies and the blaxploitation genre of the time. There are several black characters, and it even does the trope of a street criminal getting bribed for information. Driver 2 introduced Jones, and gave us Havana and Rio de Janeiro for settings. San Francisco was filled with different people due to the shift mechanic. You would possess a car and could find anybody talking to you, including Asian brothers, 2 women cops chasing someone, and a black father with his black daughter driving a truck. Plus, this game came out in 2011, which was a year before it became trendy to force in offensive diversity, which means you know that they're written better. They never draw attention to how diverse they are, and the game doesn't pat itself on the back for having them. In fact, Jericho's second in command, the person who breaks him out of a prison van with a rocket launcher, is a woman that's considered a huge national threat. So yeah, we don't need to be bitching about diversity for this franchise. Let's continue this method of good writing by bringing in the owner of the artifact, designed after Voodoo Bokors, or Papa Legba, with a Cajun accent for the complete package. He can also be a good excuse for the reason you can upgrade your abilities and stats. Even use it as an excuse to throw in customization, like colours and rims, in between taking on his missions looking at how to stop the main bad guy. Actually, we can even do better than that. We're going to show everyone how to do representation the right way, even with a main character that's white. Oh, and in order to get this story done right, we're not going to hire in a writer that doesn't want to be there. As we've seen in the last decade, people don't like it when someone is working on a franchise or genre that they very clearly hate, or just using it as a stepping stone in their career for Hollywood. You've probably seen examples of this, where they have a character roll their eyes over what's happening in the game.
Did you just shift reality?
That's why you gotta be earnest with it, play it straight. That's why the Japanese are winning in storytelling, because they actually give a shit. You start off the story with Tanner having troubles with his car. It struggles to start, but he gets it working. Jones and his co-workers keep telling him to start looking into getting a new car, which Tanner always scoffs at. After the crash, the Voodoo Ghost Pals brings Daisy to life and keeps her running. Since it's the only car that can stand up to the bad guy, everybody begrudgingly lets Tanner drive it while they back him up. And they can't call in the military either because they're scared the bad guy will possess a tank.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
Throughout the game, there's signs of her breaking down and struggling, but you keep unlocking new abilities that make her stronger and keep her running. When the final mission begins, you find out the bad guy's plan, where he gained control of a tank. She ends up taking a huge hit, and it seems like she's down for good. Jones and crew try to convince Tanner to leave her and help them figure out how to stop the bad guy. He doesn't, convinced she's still alive. You have a somber moment where Tanner talks about something like how she broke down on his first date and he pleaded for her to begin, at which point she did, and since then she's never broken down on him. Telling her that he knows she's tired and that she needs to rest, that he's going to let her rest, but he needs her for one last ride. He then turns the ignition and her engine roars to life, with fire blowing out the exhaust as she peels out after the tank, while wailing Japanese butt rock screams through the player's speakers. When you finally stop the bad guy and destroy the voodoo nonsense and all the cars return to unlife, Daisy does too and then finally breaks down, leaving Tanner to tearfully say goodbye and to thank her for her service. What does this have to do with representation? Are you serious right now? Are you telling me that there aren't thousands of guys out there that can't relate to this? Been happening in the past and will continue to happen in the future. Guy becomes an adult and manages to get a cheap car. He spends years and thousands of dollars fixing it. The stupid thing still breaks down and everybody keeps telling him to get rid of it. But he can't. He put too much of himself into the car.
I think something's wrong with her. I checked this morning, and there was water in the exhaust.
Finds himself becoming sad when it finally dies for good. Or a guy has his pride and joy, working, cleaning, and driving it for years. The years go by and he starts a family. His wife eventually convinces him to get rid of it, despite how much he loves it. It happened to my older brother. Once he managed to buy a car for a good price. While detailing it, he spotted a number he didn't recognize. Looking it up, he discovers that the chassis is actually used for police vehicles. He was happy to own that. Then one day he came home from work to discover his partner selling the car for $500 AUD. Someone like him could relate to this hypothetical story. A lot of people could relate to that. That's how you do representation. Would gamers like that story?
Come on, old girl. I know you're not built to take this kind of punishment, but you and me, we got history.
Yeah, it's like all content. It's good if you can get a good writer. The concept is silly, but gamers love this shit. If you were to ask who are some of the greatest video game villains, non-gamers will say something like Mikhail Bell and Ganon. Gamers will answer with Senator Armstrong and Ganon. But gamers with refined taste will say Shodan or Eric Sparrow from Tony Hawk's Underground, also known as Thug. Keep in mind, Eric is a teenager from New Jersey in a video game about skateboarding. You may be cocking an eyebrow at that, but anyone who's played Thug can tell you that by the end of the story, all they wanted to do was punch Eric in the face. The writing for Thug 1 was so good that it was my main reason, and maybe many other gamers' reason, for playing Thug 2. But instead of getting a surprisingly good story, we just get 30 minutes of Bam Margera sucking himself off.
Hello, butt nuggets.
So yeah, even guys like me, who don't care about cars, could even get attached to this imaginary game about a dying car that will never exist. What about women relating to losing a car? Yeah, sure. What else is there for Driver? There's Driver Syndicate, a remake of the original Driver game made by one dude, but previous Driver games won't be coming back. Like I said, licensing issues. Even if they do manage to bring them back as a re-release or remaster, licensing will give them an expiration date. You see, publishers today, especially quadruple A publishers, don't like gamers. They hate them. They make their money from non-gamers who wouldn't play a game that's older than 6 months, especially a game that has gameplay and a failure state. When a game has a failure state, journalists demand a non-game option. Usually they call this easy mode. They would never turn their attention to any Driver game, even if they licensed their favorite songs. The money Ubisoft would make from Driver wouldn't make up the licensing costs, so there's no reason for them to ever re-release or remaster them. Only gamers would buy these video games. It sucks. A video game made as a video game, made by video gamers, made for video gamers, not available to video gamers because of all the crap they put into the game to sell to normies. Which also makes it hard for a streamer or YouTuber to play without turning the music off, or constantly shouting she over the music. Thanks, Metallica. As for me, I guess I can go back to Driver 1. There may be some missions I haven't played yet. Driver 2 has a lot of unlocks, but I'm not that interested. There's the Driver games I haven't played. Maybe one day I'll go back to them. Maybe I'll even go back to Driver San Francisco. There's still some achievements I'm missing. I thought I did everything. Let's see what I missed. In online multiplayer, fuck this.